This movie made me think about how different it would be to try to portray this today. And I think it would be impossible because of social media.
Did you say today or to gay?
I heard to gay.
I heard to gay. I was like, okay, I'm going to learn something new today.
I have not slept at all in days.
To gay.
To gay.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass. We're gonna die.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Ash Sick Balls Chambers.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit us at shatthemovies.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. That's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, please subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and Watchmen. Find all the information and past episodes at shatontv.com. And finally, if you'd like to hang out with us live all week long, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatthemovies.com/Twitch, where we host watch parties and play video games like Back 4 Blood and Destiny 2. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing today?
So, Gene, people have all kinds of friends throughout their lives. Some friends you go to school with, some friends you party with. Many come in and out of your life like a busboy at a restaurant, but some very special friends, the ones that stick around, the when you need them. You know, they're the type of friends that you want to take on a road trip to find a dead kid. And that's what our listener, Scott H. is. He is a super supporter of the podcast. He has commissioned Valley Girl, One Crazy Summer, Unforgiven, Spinal Tap, and tonight's movie, the 1986 coming-of-age film, Stand By Me.
And Scott says, Dear Shat Crew, thanks for accepting my commission of Stand By Me. I first saw this movie in 1986 at the Baybrook Mall movie theater. I fell in love with it. It reminded me of my 8th grade year with a group of friends that I hung out with. We weren't in the in crowd, but we all loved movies and comic books. We would always sleep over with a friend that had HBO and stay up and watch the movies with the in the description. 2 of these movies I remember were Stripes and Conan the Barbarian. We then would wake up and ride our bikes to Yellow Springs to go buy some of the comics at the comic book store. It was a great year, and I had great memories. We all lost track of each other when we got to high school. We all started hanging out with different groups of friends, just like this movie. I hope you enjoy it and give it a great Shat score. Keep up the good work and have a great holiday season. Scott H. from Friendswood, Texas. Right by me.
Before any of you go out there and start looking through our back catalog, we have not done Spinal Tap yet.
No, they're coming. They're coming. Sorry, I should have said future podcasts.
Stand By Me is a 1986 coming-of-age film directed by Rob Reiner. It is based on Stephen King's 1982 novella, The Body. Wil Wheaton, River Phoenix, Corey Feldman, and Jerry O'Connell star in it as 4 boys who in 1959 go on a hike to find the dead body of a missing boy and confront a bully played by Kiefer Sutherland. The film was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay and 2 Golden Globe Awards, one for Best Drama Motion Picture and one for Best Director.
This is one of those random 80s films that just somehow passed me by. I had this completely wrong. I thought Sean Astin was in this. I had absolutely no idea that he wasn't. And so because of that, no clue what it was about. Really excited, though, to have an excuse to see a young Kiefer and a young John Cusack, though. It made the absolute whole thing worth it. And love a good Corey Feldman, although he's not really a huge character in this one. But I was glad it was commissioned because I feel like this is one of those 80s films that, you know, you can't miss.
For me, it was my 13th birthday. It was right around there. I went into the theater because I love Stephen King. I loved everything he had done, even the stupid shit like that, whatever Swing Shift or whatever with the rats in the mill. Even that movie I loved, the stupid stuff. I got in there expecting this to be, okay, we're going to find a dead body. This is going to be, it was very different. It kind of kindled like a love I had for 50s music. I was talking, Gene, before we recorded that my first concert was Sha Na Na that my parents took me to. So between that and this film, it really started love for 50s music. I bought the soundtrack, the cassette, and I wore that shit out. I loved it. I love this film. And thank you very much for the commission. It's Scott, you're a great supporter, a great friend of the podcast, and we appreciate you.
All right, Big D, with that introduction, let's roll the trailer.
In all our lives, there's a fall from innocence. A time after which we are never the same. It happened in the summer of 1959. A long time ago. But only if you measure it in terms of years.
You guys want to go see a dead body? I bet you anything that if we find him, we'll get our pictures in the paper. Yeah, we can even be on TV. Sure, we'll be heroes. Yeah. Just supposing that I told the story. Do you think that anyone would have believed it? This is really a good time. It must be a blast. I'm never gonna get out of this town, am I, Gordie? I can do anything you want, man. I just wish that I could go someplace where nobody knows me.
12-year-old Gordie Lachance's parents are too busy grieving the recent death of older brother Denny to give Gordie much attention. While looking for money that he buried beneath his parents' porch, Gordie's friend Vern overhears his older brother Billy talking with his friend Charlie about finding the body of a missing boy, Ray Brower, outside of town. When Vern tells Gordie and their friends Chris and Teddy, the four boys decide to go looking for the body. After Chris steals his father's pistol, he and Gordie run into local hoodlum Ace Merrill and Chris's older brother Eyeball Chambers. Ace threatens Chris with a lit cigarette and steals Gordie's Yankees cap, which was a gift from Denny. So 1986 was phase one of Kiefer Sutherland, right? This is before 24. This is before Lost Boys. We got young Kiefer Sutherland, where I think he was at his peak. This is a movie set in 1959, but this guy is not looking 50s at all. Like, there's not even an attempt, right? He's got like bleached blonde hair. I was surprised he didn't have like a crucifix earring or something like that. Dude is already dressed to be David in Lost Boys, but it really, really works. He's so menacing. He's so cool in that black t-shirt. And you really believe that this motherfucker would burn a kid with a cigarette or stab someone over a dead body. He's supposed to be this menacing villain. And all I can think is like, fuck, he's kind of hot.
Kinda. Like, he's for real hot. And I think that you're right. Like, this is clearly like David before he was turned. Like, we don't know David's origin story. We've now found it. He changed his name from Ace to David at some point because this is him. And I think that the vamp, it just kind of heightened his bullying tendencies. But Kiefer looks good.
I am now officially declaring 2021 the year of John Cusack with Shat the Movies. I'm seeing movies of his I didn't know existed, like One Crazy Summer and The Sure Thing. And I'm also seeing him in movies that I forgot he was in. I had totally forgotten he was in Stand By Me. And he's only in the movie briefly, like toward the beginning, but he's such a good big brother in this movie. He's the star athlete who doesn't forget about his invisible sibling who lives in his shadow. And we've seen this a few times before, but I always like to call out how different this take is on siblings from most 80s movies. Most 80s movies loved pitting siblings against each other, But that's not reality. Like, at least in my experience, my older sister cared more for me than anyone else growing up. So again, these like sort of wholesome relationships that we don't see very often in 80s movies are coming through strong in Stand By Me. And I think it takes some balls from a movie maker to attempt that, because it's easy to have siblings that are picking on each other, fighting in the backseat of the car on a road trip. But having ones that care about each other and then trying to make that believable on screen, that's a challenge.
I got to tell you, one of the fun things about doing this podcast, I feel like I'm learning the history of cinema, of 80s and 90s. A couple weeks ago, Gene, you and I did The Sure Thing. So we had very little knowledge of John Cusack's early origin. So then I'm like, oh shit, the pieces are coming together. Rob Reiner directed The Sure Thing 2 years before Stand By Me. He said, oh, John Cusack's pretty good. Let me get him on the next project, Stand By Me. Boom. Cusack becomes a star. I'm like, fuck, I had no idea until doing the podcast. And it was fantastic. I thought he was great. He plays Denny. He's not in the movie much, but he is a believable older brother. And Gordie's parents, okay, they're suffering grief at Denny's death. They are redirecting that pain directly into Gordon. Why couldn't you have friends like your brother? And we see that Denny is the only champion that Gordie had. He tries to bring up his writing to his parents. And Denny is clearly the favorite. So, Ash, I got to ask you this. I only have one child. And usually you ask people this, and they give you some bullshit answer. I want the honest answer. I want to ask you for what your answer is, but parents say, oh, I love my kids equally. That's fucking impossible. Is that true?
I think you love your kids differently. Right. Like, I think that you love them equally, but in very different ways. So, I think a lot of it depends on which kid is more like you than the other one, like which one you more relate to. Finn serves a very particular purpose in my life, and Ellie serves a completely opposite one. And Ellie's identical to me, and Finn is like the total opposite from me. So Finn and I have a really special relationship, and so do Ellie and I, but they're completely different. So I don't know that you can love your kids equally in terms of loving the same things about them, but you certainly love them a lot. You just love them in different ways, unless you're like my family, where like my mom clearly, like my brother is the one that she loves most of all. And I'm just kind of like there. I think that happens sometimes. Like my mom clearly has a favorite, but she loves me, sure, but she has a favorite. So maybe that's a better question is, can parents have favorites? Yeah, they absolutely can have favorites. But do they love their kids? I think they love both their kids, or 3 of their kids, or 7 of their kids.
So if you had to choose, you could actually make that choice. There's 2 seats left on the lifeboat. You could pick the child.
Like a Sophie's Choice situation here?
Like a Titanic choice, okay? You got 2 seats
no,
left
I would
on
put them both on the lifeboat.
No, come on. You can't do that.
I could never choose between my kids, no.
So you couldn't pick one?
No.
Okay.
No, I would I would grieve them in very different ways if one of them passed away. But there's no way I could choose between them. Mm-mm.
I've got so many advantages over my sister. So my dad and my brother both died. So my mom's like, I can't lose like the last male. And then also I'm the baby in the family. And then also I'm just the cooler one. So like I'm a shoo-in. I know my mom loves me the best. 100%.
Yeah, I think she kind of, you were her last choice. You might not have been the most popular if she had all the options, but yes, you're the coolest right now. I think, yes, clearly my mother loves me much more, even though she should not. My sister's more intelligent. She's more accomplished. She is a wonderful human being. She is fantastic where I am flawed, but yet my mother still has this reverence for me. She loves me. Oh, but your brother and my poor sister. So it sucks. Maybe it's because I'm the youngest child.
Yeah.
Does she have a hit podcast?
But she does sometimes appear on this hit podcast. And I'm going to bring her back because we're going to Thanksgiving. So we might do contest part 2. Everybody get prepared.
Steve, you're immediately disqualified.
So I did not realize that this movie was a Stephen King film until I decided to research it. But I have to say, upon watching it, this feels like the PG, like non-scary version of It. You've got a death of a brother. You've got a grieving family that misdirects their grief. You got a bully. All we need is a killer clown, and it's Derry, right? It's Derry, Maine. I just didn't realize how similar a lot of his stories were. And I mean, this one really is like a recycled, a ripoff, whatever you want to say, version of all of his other stories.
Oh, yeah. This is an Indian burial ground away from being full-blown Stephen King. Like, the King Bee famously pans Stephen King. Before the King Bee got kicked off of Twitter, he was always shitting on Stephen King, directly at Stephen King. And I would always defend Stephen King, but I think now that we've seen enough of the films and I've read enough of his work, that, like, Stephen King is the master of horror the way Thomas Kinkade is the master of light. Like, yeah, he writes books and they have, like, scary stuff in them, but I'm no longer impressed with his ideas or his craft. He's like a one-trick pony.
No, I disagree. I think writers write what they know. You just have to look at Reiner's interpretation of this novella. They write what they've experienced. The Castle Rock bit, it's in every one of his stories. It's a similar story. It's what he has experienced and what he knows. I think, yes, his stories have grown and they've become more complex, but to say he's a one-trick pony, I don't necessarily think that's fair.
Well, the four boys begin their trip. After stopping at a junkyard for water, they are caught trespassing by owner Milo Pressman and his dog, Chopper. They escape over a fence, and Milo calls Teddy's mentally ill father a loony and taunts him about it. Teddy, enraged, tries to attack Milo, but is restrained by the other boys. The four continue their hike, and Chris encourages Gordie to fulfill his potential as a writer, despite his father's disapproval. When they cross a railroad bridge, the boys are nearly killed by an approaching train.
So, Gene, you and I were talking before we started to record, and I think almost like buying a handgun, there should be a cooling off period. We were supposed to record this yesterday, and I would have come in hot. I would have come in very different. But 24 hours gave me some time to reflect and time to think. And I think that this film, whereas I was disliking it before as like a boomer coming of age, look how special our adolescence was, into more of, it's a story about universal adolescence. And there's a lot of common things that everybody shares growing up that hit me. Then, like the railroad tracks. I had my friends. We would go on the railroad tracks. We would play. We'd put coins. We'd flatten them. You would try to see who could get closer to it. There was always like adventures around there. It was something universal. So watching this, I could feel myself in the 80s down by the railroad tracks, down by the rivers that always intertwine with them, and feeling that same universal experience about friends growing up and talking about life.
I just don't understand where the fuck you grew up if you were by train tracks all the time, because like we had no train tracks in New Orleans. There's the one right there in Claiborne, but like nobody's going down to play down there. I mean, I guess like the danger was like the actual like back streets of New Orleans, but it's not due to trains or dead bodies in the wild. Like we just knew street smarts, right? Like we knew to cross the street if someone approached you from the other side at night in the quarter, and you knew to park near a street lamp. Like we never played like this.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up around two kinds of trains. So the subway trains in Queens, I was not allowed to play on. When we moved to Arizona and Tempe, there were lots of train tracks, and train tracks are still the coolest. Like, I love the train tracks. As a hasher, we often run trails that like either go along the tracks or near the tracks. Man, you find all kinds of neat shit near them. There's like mattresses and toilets and like old TVs and
tons of shit,
dead bodies. And yeah, but these, you know, the cool thing about the train tracks though, is they give us a sense of a world where cars can't go. Right. So there's like parts of the city you've never seen because you never drive by them. And it's just like this hidden world. And my favorite train experience was at King B's house. A train on the tracks broke down and it was just sitting there on the tracks. So, of course, my punk rock friends all go and they're like looking around to see if there's anything in the train to steal. They open up a car and it's just full of Budweiser.
Wow.
And so they formed like one of those like fireman lines.
Yeah.
So it was like 50 dudes deep, and everybody was just handing cases of beer to each other.
Like a chain.
Yeah, like a chain. They filled up the nearest house with beer, and we drank that shit all summer. It was fucking fantastic. And the train appears multiple times in this movie. It's its own character, kind of like the deer in the woods. Like this movie is not ashamed to really have its metaphors and its symbols right out there in your face. But in the first train scene, we get Teddy who's standing there trying to like what they call kissing the train after Vietnam, right? Where guys would just stand there and just take a train to the face, and that's how they would kill themselves. We don't know if Teddy's going to do it or not. I haven't really made up my mind if he actually wanted to die that day. But Chris pulls him off the tracks. Teddy's very upset about the fact that Chris, denied him that agency, denied him that choice. To make peace, Chris reaches out to Teddy and says to skin it, right? Like basically slide their hands across each other. Mm-hmm. And it's a sign of forgiveness and brotherhood. And I wondered if everybody understood this. Like this is still a thing that kids do, because when I was a boy, like rituals like this were huge. Whether it was after you got in a fist fight or you got in an argument, you had to officially symbolize it was behind you. And there was, the pinky swearing, crossing your heart, swearing on your mother's life. I even did like the Blood Brothers thing, right? Where you like slice your palm and shook hands on it. We took this shit very seriously. And I had forgotten that we used to do this shit. But as soon as I saw it, I was like, man, do people look at this movie and think that's goofy? Because that shit was very real to us.
Yeah, it's goofy. Boys are weird.
Yeah, because girls hold their grudges and they don't let it go.
Oh
We've discussed that. Yeah. That's why Gene and I would cut our hands, we'd shake hands, boom, it's done.
We're not going to readdress that. But the point is that I never did this growing up with boys or with girls. And we never had adventures like this. I mean, the most we ever did was we would go out on the street and we would play like we were Ninja Turtles. I was always Raphael. But we never went away camping. We never like walked off from our parents for longer than just a couple of hours, the way that these movies depict. And I feel like my childhood was like, shortchanged in some way because I didn't have these insane bonding experience that you guys did.
No, instead you just had an impending sense of doom at all times when you're on the street.
That's true.
But I want to ask you guys, so now Teddy is obviously, he's out there. He has something to prove. He's always mentioning and referring to his father storming the beaches of Normandy. It's implied that he actually was a veteran and he's up in the loony bin. And we see that, Teddy's wearing the dog tags. Did you get a vibe that he might not have been up there and this was just a story that they were telling Teddy to deal with his father's abuse and why he was the way he was? Or do you believe the background of Teddy's father is genuine?
I mean, so many veterans at this point had come home and started families and had mental issues that I think that it would be completely plausible. But you're absolutely right, Big D, that this could be, either his own coping mechanism or a story that he's told to sort of make his dad out to be better than he is. When I saw Big Fish, it had such a huge emotional impact on me because I never met my father. And so all I have to go on is the stories that I'm told about him. You've got to believe that those get embellished, that people are only giving you the best of the best stories about the person, making and building them up to be more than they actually were.
Well, and another thing that I think that this movie brought up for me was this time period when friends were very different than the friends you have today. And now, granted, I wasn't doing blood oaths and, going and walking down train tracks with my friends, but I had friends like this, friends that just like believed in you because you were their friend. And there's that scene where River Phoenix is telling him, telling Gordie, you're going to be a good writer. And it was really moving to watch. And sometimes I feel like our podcast is like random therapy for all of us. And I was thinking about like, I have a very complicated relationship with my mom. I am not at all what she wanted in a daughter at all. And if it hadn't have been for friends like this who told me that I was good and could kind of be what I wanted, I don't think I would have survived from like 12 to 15. And I still wound up with like a horrible eating disorder, but it would have been a lot worse if I hadn't had them around to be like, it's all right to be pissed off and it's all right to, realize that she knows nothing about you. And I really related to that in this. And I was not expecting it to be as emotional as it was for me.
Yeah, I love those bonds that they were showing, the support system that these four had for each other. And another thing I noticed is that they weren't afraid to make physical contact with one another. And it seems so weird to me. Like at first I felt kind of like uncomfortable about it for a second. And then I realized how rarely boys touch one another in film. Like it just does not fucking happen. Watch the Monster Squad or we watch Goonies or The Explorers. The boys don't touch each other. And my friends and I were always slapping one another on the back or hugging, wrapping our arms around each other's necks. Like it fucking feels good to make contact with other kids. I don't know if kids still do that, if that's like taboo now or whatever. But in the 80s, at least in the early 80s when I was a kid, that was just perfectly fucking normal.
Guys, we can be ruthless and cutthroat to each other. You're tearing each other down. You're making mother jokes. But God forbid somebody outside the group does it. It's only allowed between that tight group. So I do love, Gene, how they showed it. This group, this four, they're together. They have like an intimacy that they know each other's stories. They know each other better than they know themselves. And it was nice to see that in a way that we don't see the superficial exterior version of it. We're seeing it from within the group and how they feel disarmed, and they're not afraid to be who they are.
That evening, Gordie tells the fictional story of David Lardass Hogan, an obese boy who is constantly bullied. Chris confides to Gordie that he hates being associated with his family's reputation. The next day, the boys swim across a pond and discover it is filled with leeches. Gordie faints after finding a leech in his underwear. After more hiking, the boys locate Ray Brower's body. The discovery is traumatic for Gordie, who asks Chris why his brother Denny had to die and claims his father hates him. Chris disagrees, asserting that Gordie's father simply does not know him well. So finally, we get to the Leeches scene. If there's anything I remembered about Stand By Me, more than the body, more than the train scene, more than the refrain of Stand By Me playing throughout the fucking movie.
Multiple times.
It's the leeches. They freaked me out as a child. I was convinced that any murky freshwater was filled with leeches that would get all over me and bite my penis. Like I would not get in lakes. I would not get in ponds. I would not get in dirty pools. And thankfully, I grew up in Arizona where like we don't have a ton of spots where, I mean, there are a few places where there's leeches, but not in general. Like if you go to most of the lakes and rivers out here, we don't have leeches, like just going around looking for dicks. But while watching this movie, I got a little nervous about the fact that I didn't know how to remove a leech because I knew that somebody had told me once that there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. So if you do have a leech on you, do not just pull it off or try to burn it off. You want to get like a credit card or a flat, blunt object, and you want to find the tiny sucker, right? So there's like a posterior and an anterior. So the anterior is going to be like the tinier one. That's where its mouth is, right? You need to just slide its tiny head off of you gently, and then you remove the butt sucker. You could just pull that one off or use the card on that one too, and you're good to go. Because if you yank it off, it could barf bacteria into the wound, and that's the actual dangerous part. The other fascinating part, if you're really patient and curious about leeches, is if you just hang out, when they get full, they just let go and leave. So if you want to be patient with your leech, be a good host. That's the polite way to do it.
I don't think anyone's going to take that option. So my only personal experiences was ticks. So you're right. You cannot grab and pull the tick off because the head will stay in. And it was strange, like you said, Gene, that how these kids are like kind of intimate and touchy with each other. In the military, you got to do a tick check and you can't check your ass. So you'd be like, hey, could you check me out? Yeah, you get your Leatherman and you slowly pull the ticks out of your ass. But Gordie makes a joke later about having like a thick one. I'm tending to believe that Gordie did have a thick one because that leech came off and there was more blood on that leech than any of the other kids.
I would just die. I despise bugs, all bugs. And one full of my blood would just be way too much. And I thought that you burn ticks off. I thought you burned leeches off. I thought it's a thing that you do. Apparently I'm wrong. Shows how little I'm outdoors. I guess I should have walked some more train tracks as a kid because no reference. None at all. Blech.
This is where we get to my cooling off period because I was watching the film. We had just come off of our Monster Squad review, and these kids are happy. They're great. They're fun actors. We're saying, why wasn't this the Goonies? And then I get to some of these scenes here, and I originally was underwhelmed with the performances. Like, why do I remember this being such a pivotal moment where they were saying, look at these kid actors, look at what they could have been. What could River Phoenix have been if he had survived, if he hadn't OD'd? So in the 24 hours since, I've kind of thought about it, and I did some additional research, and I looked back on how Rob Reiner had selected these actors. All of them had experience except for Wil Wheaton, because he wanted their original background to play a role in how these kids performed. And Wil Wheaton came out recently, it was the 35th anniversary, and he said that he felt much like Gordie did because his mother was like that Hollywood mom who forced him to do it. He was out there living the life through his mother. He was a ghost in his own home. He felt miserable. He felt like the character. And I think that Reiner picked the characters and the actors that paired off. River Phoenix, they had 5 years of experience. All the other actors. And they had troubles that they brought into it. And when these kids had to come to a tough scene, he would relate their personal stories of their experiences and said, bring that into it. So I think he almost cast actors that could do it, perform it, but also had the background that was similar to the characters. And after watching that, I went back and rewatched the scenes and I'm like, fuck, I can see Wil Wheaton is talking about his mom. He's not talking about his dad. He's talking about his actual mother being that Hollywood stage mom.
One of the things I know I've heard about Stand By Me over the years is that it's really powerful, that the kid performances are powerful. And this isn't a goofy film like The Goonies or like Monster Squad, that this is like real acting for children. And I don't know. I don't think that it's overhyped, especially for River Phoenix. I loved River Phoenix. I think My Own Private Idaho is an absolutely wonderful film. He's great in it. He was great in a lot of other things. And I was really surprised to see like this awkward stage River Phoenix, though, because the River Phoenix I remember is like this cool, like suave, hot guy. And this is like an awkward, buzz cut kid. And it was kind of weird, but at the same time, it was kind of interesting to see his origins. And I stand by the fact that he is significantly a better actor than his brother is.
So this entire movie, we're going to see the body, right? That's the whole point of this trip. The kids are going, and we've got two groups that are going to the body. We got the four boys that are going there on foot. It's like a whole hike for them. It's very Lord of the Rings. The Fellowship is going off to Mordor, and then you got Ace and his crew that are going there, by car. And that you're going to have this big climax where they all encounter the body. And I was bracing myself to see the body because I remember as a kid in the 80s seeing it and being like horrified. And so I was like, oh gosh, I got to see this mutilated body. Like, how severely decomposed is it going to be? Is it going to be super gross? And then we see the body and it's not that bad. It's just like some dead kid. It's like, and literally the guy who was the body was like some stunt man. And they're just like, here you go, you're a dead body. At first I was a little disappointed that it wasn't that gross. It was like a mix of relief and disappointment. But I started thinking about the decision they made on how the body got there, and I really appreciated that. It's sort of nihilistic. Ray Brower is just a kid who died. Like, there's no gruesome murder. There's no mystery. It's not like Ace's gang did it. It was just He was a kid who was out picking blueberries, got hit by a train, and died. And that was very satisfying for me.
It was very satisfying you, that boy getting hit by a train, picking blueberries.
Yeah, even though I get to see like a Silence of the Lambs type body, I was okay with it.
Yeah, I have to say I was pretty nervous throughout the film because this kid's been hit by a train. So I figured he was going to be like smushed, flattened. I have this distinct memory when I was growing up. I was at a Mardi Gras parade and someone had been run over by a float, and they died and we saw them run over and they were like smushed like roadkill. And it was really, really upsetting and has stuck out. It's in my nightmares at least 3 or 4 times a year. And I was really panicked that was going to be what this guy looked like. And I was relieved that it wasn't. There were no maggots. Like, it was very Laura Palmer, Twin Peaks makeup with like, the blue around his face. Like it kind of looked a little unrealistic. And I think that there's something that has happened with violence in movies that have just kind of escalated since this time. And now today, if this movie were made, this would be like a super realistic, grossed out body. And just in general, movies have gotten a lot more intense with what they present to us in terms of violence. I mean, look at TV, look at Game of Thrones and Oberyn Martell's eyes being, pushed out of his head just a couple of years ago. And even from like 2000, I just watched Gladiator recently, and I remembered Gladiator as being like very gory and very violent. And it's really not. Like, I would argue that if Gladiator were made today, it would be a PG-13 movie with the type of violence that's in it. So I think we're just used to seeing more violence. And back then, this probably was really shocking, but today it was like, meh, whatever.
But I mean, I think everybody remembers their first dead body, whether it's like a wake, like some kind of open casket, or I was learning to ride motorcycles with my dad up at the Kensico Dam, and a hurricane went by racing a vet, and we came around the corner and the guy had laid the bike down. So we came upon him, helmet had come off. I mean, it was that first experience. And you expect it to be this otherworldly thing. And when you see it's just a body. It's just like a dead animal. It is. And I like the way that they showed that. It's not this over the top thing that's, you just realize we are just meat and bones. And when shit happens, hey, that's it. Sorry, that was a bit dark.
After this, I got to get on my motorcycle and go to take the King Bee out for a passy for his birthday. And I'm like, fuck.
Don't fucking race the Corvette.
God,
Don't.
please wear your leather.
The dude's head was fucking open. It was just...
Ash, you know I only wear my leather for you. Come on.
Oh.
Ace and his gang, you see Sarah's boots. Ace and his gang arrive, announce that they are claiming the body, and threaten to beat the 4 boys if they interfere. When Chris insults Ace and refuses to back down, Ace draws a switchblade to menace him. Gordie gets the gun and fires a shot into the air, then trains the gun on Ace. Ace demands the weapon, but Gordie refuses, calling Ace a cheap dime store hood. Ace and his gang retreat, vowing revenge. The 4 boys report the body to the authorities via anonymous phone call, and they walk back to Castle Rock and part ways.
So now Ace, he is a sociopath. He is fantastic. Kiefer Sutherland, you believe when he's playing chicken with that truck, he does not care. He does not care about anyone else's life. He is going to cut someone's throat. He's going to kill someone. I believe that he would hurt Gordie in the group until Gordie drops that kick-ass line of the film. Ace says, what are you going to do? Shoot us all, Gordie? He says, no, Ace, I'm just going to shoot you. I was like, fuck yes. Amazing line. Fantastic. It got me out of my seat on the couch. And I was like, yes, so good.
And this scene also makes sense of the bond between Gordie and Chris, because they're real ones. Like everybody else splits, right? Like the other 2 boys, they take off, but Gordie, he's not going anywhere. He would rather pull a gun and have that standoff and possibly drop a dude, just to stay by Chris, because that's the kind of friendship they have. And I remember having friends like this, and I think I still have a few who back my play no matter what. And I take criticism sometimes from my family or even from my partner, not currently, but past partners about my relationship with the King Bee, right? But there's a bond that's been forged, and you do not let that go no matter what. And it does drag me into shitty situations sometimes, but if we're out and he throws a punch, no matter what the situation is, I'm in for it. I'm in, let's go, and I think that it's important to have that kind of friend in your life.
Well, and I think those friends are forged at this time in your life. I don't feel like you'd meet somebody at 41 and then become that kind of friend for you. You have to meet them around this age. And I do think that's one thing that Stephen King does really well in this story, and that the movie kind of really explores nicely, which is this tween or junior high age that these kids all are. Because there's this moment when they're all standing there and it's Gordie and his friends. It's obvious they're just kids when they're up against Ace, because there's something that happens, especially to boys between 12 to 17, where just all of a sudden one day they look like men. They just all of a sudden look like grown-ups. You're like, what the fuck? So you've got this juxtaposition here that's so powerful with Kiefer as Ace, and then you've got Gordie and all of the younger kids, and it kind of just shows how those boys one day will look like that, but right now they're just little. They're just kids.
It really gave you a sense of this very specific and brief period in a male's life. And Ash, I think you nailed it on the head. It's just before that change. So as we're talking about the change in life, as we're talking about this friendship and how these friends, will eventually split off, this is exactly that kernel of the moment. And they captured it perfectly. In present day, adult Gordie is writing a memoir of the journey and states that Teddy and Vern drifted away from him and Chris shortly after entering junior high school. Gordie reveals that Chris later went on to college and became a lawyer. While attempting to break up a fight in a restaurant, he was stabbed to death. Despite not having seen Chris for over a decade, Gordie types that he will miss him forever. He ends the story with the following words: "I never had any friends later on like the ones I had when I was 12. Jesus, does anyone?" So one of the things that annoys me the most about the internet, particularly Instagram, is when people post quotes and then they'll attribute it to anonymous. Don't even bother with the anonymous, because fucking give me a name, right? But there's a meme that's going around and it's one of those anonymous ones. Some people think it's from The Sandlot. It's not. And it says, at some point in your childhood, you and your friends went outside to play together for the last time and nobody knew it. And when I first saw that, it hit pretty hard, because we don't take enough time to celebrate each other or to say goodbyes or to really let one another know how much we mean to one another. And I think that we tend to discount our friendships from our youth or even our friendships from our past because they ended. This movie really caused me to reflect and think that, just because people walk out of one another's lives, it doesn't mean that the bonds that they had when they had them weren't strong. Like, there are people that I die for today that I haven't seen in 20 years. Bond is still there, even though you're not in constant communication, because you might not need to be.
But Gene, this final quote, I never had any friends later on like the ones I had when I was 12. Jesus, does anyone? It makes me sad. Are you kidding me? How? Come on, people. I think every stage of your life, you have friends. You have friends as a kid. You have friends in high school, friends in college, friends in your first job, friends after, friends as you're established. Friends. There are some people, and you have to, if you're an adult and you're fairly confident in yourself, you're going to realize people come in and out of your life. It doesn't mean they don't like you. It just means, fuck, I got kids. I don't have time. And it could be a text. Hey, what's up? Happy birthday. Yo, did you see the game last night? That's enough to connect. I still care about you, but I can't dedicate the time to you. And this seems like somebody's like, oh, my 12-year-old friends were so great. Come on, man. Your whole life is going to be like that. I have people 5 years ago who I love, who we stay in touch a bit, and the people you normally think will be there forever aren't. The best friend of my life, the best man at my wedding, I was the best man at his, was a guy I worked at Disney with who was a passing friend. He was the only one in the Army who wrote me every week. I'm like, who the fuck? How did he do this over my college friends, my friends before, my fraternity brothers? And to this day, I'm good friends with him. We could go months without talking, but when we do talk, it's like no time has passed.
This line is what's really beautiful about this movie. I think there's an innocence to friendship at this age that they're portraying here, because like I've kind of alluded to, you survive off of each other because you don't have anything but one another. And so you later on in your life, you choose friends that match you. You choose friends that are like you. But at this age, there's like this contract of sorts where it's not necessarily that you enjoy each other's company. It's that we're located by you. We're who live in the cul-de-sac. It's different than later on. There are people who truly watch you grow up. They watch like you have like your own like awakening to like your sexuality and like the first time you kiss boys and you learn about it with them. And there's just an innocence and this coming of age alongside them that creates a bond that like nothing else does. And I am not someone who likes a large group of friends. It is too much fucking work. I like having just a small group of people that I've known like forever. And randomly along the way, I may add like there's a really good friend of mine that I've added to that group about 6 years ago. Like there's some people I've added on, or like I meet people like you guys, or like, Gene, who's very similar to me. Like it's like, okay, you can come into the fold, right? But I'm not like out there like trying to make friends. And that's what you do when you're young, though. You just are looking for people to like be with, and you don't have friends like the ones you have with when you were 12 anymore. It just doesn't happen because you become an adult and a grown up and realize most people suck and move on.
And there's another dimension to it, and that's a chemical dimension, right? So when we think about our childhood, like we haven't developed quite yet in the way our brains are functioning at the time, we feel things so intensely. So although those bonds with those friends, like Big D, like you mentioned, like they might not be as logical, or the fact that, you still might make friends later, you've changed, right? You as a person are an adult. There's a swarm of feelings that you get as a kid, and that's a combination of hormones and brain chemicals and brain development, where at that time, those friends that you make are chemically and emotionally more intense than any friends you'll ever make in your life. And I think about it, and although, again, like Ash mentioned, like I love you guys, like I love to hang out with you guys, we have a very special bond. But I think about the people who are closest and like dearest to me, the people who outside of my family will always endure as friends. And I haven't made one of those since I was 19 years old. Like that was the last time. And everything else is just, it's a strong friendship, but it's not the same.
I thought a lot about how differently this movie would be made today. And I think one thing that would keep it completely separate from the iteration we have here is social media, right? Because with social media, Gordie and Chris would still randomly like kind of still be in touch with one another. And here's the deal. When I graduated high school, there was this relief. And I remember feeling it. It was my last day of school. We got out at like noon that day. And I was like, oh, I never have to see these people again. And it was glorious. I cannot tell you the like euphoria I felt. And again, I remember that exact moment and that exact feeling. And then Facebook happened in 2005. And so today I'll have these people from like 2001 that will know my kids' names and use their names when commenting on things like, oh, Ellie's so cute. And they're people I went to high school with, and I have literally not spoken to them or seen them physically in person for 20 years, but they share my memories. They share this weird time that we once had together. And because of that, they feel like we're kind of connected. And I don't know about you guys, but I would prefer that we could just walk away from people, remember them for who they were, with a little bit of mystery about who they would eventually become.
Exactly.
The worst is now I'll go look at that person. Like I'll get a friend request or I'll see something in my newsfeed. I will click on their name. I will look at a photo of them. I'm like, who the fuck is that? I recently heard an interview with the author Gia Tolentino, and she was talking about how like social media has created a world with no backstage. Like this idea that it's performative, right? And so we do performances throughout life, right? So like Ash, when you're interacting with your kids, you're performing mom. You know, when you go to the store and you're buying something, you're performing polite customer. Right now, we're performing podcast host, right? But at some point we get to go backstage. Like we get to go, all the performances are off and you're just you. When we're talking about a world with social media, there is no backstage. And so like here, we can do the podcast and we can shut it off and leave. But with these people, you know, these people from high school or whatever, you're keeping up a performance for eternity. Like that's fucking exhausting. There's really no reason to keep in touch with these people. After you graduate, after you leave a job, there is no need to keep in touch with those people. And the other crazy thing is I feel like when I check Facebook or when I check Twitter or when I check Instagram, that we have that human impulse, right? Where we want to see how everybody's doing, right? What's going on? What's going on with everybody? And I check that and I go, okay, that's what's going on today. And I leave it at that. But did I call my mom? Like, did I text my friends or my family and see how they're doing? No. It's literally only the things people chose to perform on social media are the things that I'm taking in today. And that's my concept of the world. It's super fucked up. We got to do better.
I think I'm fucked up just like you because I don't want to know what has become of them. I want to maintain that memory of Billy Zelly, me and him playing G.I. Joe and reading comic books. I don't want to hear about broken marriages, kids, whatever happened. Like, I want to remember it the way it was. I've moved on. If he tells me, oh, I'm in a dark place, I'll be like, shit, okay, I'm going to talk to Billy. I'm going to find out what I could do. But I would rather remember in his playhouse, dressed in our G.I. Joe gear, reading the comics, and I can move on. And I think that's why I don't go on Facebook. Never. I went the other day. Vanessa goes, oh, you got to go on Facebook. I'm looking at like friend requests. I'm like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. I've not gone on Facebook, my personal Facebook, for like 3 years because I don't care. I don't want to see the bullshit. And to put a little bow tie on it, Stephen King is notorious for hating versions of his work. He hated Kubrick's version of The Shining. So this film, I'm like, okay, let's see what he found. What did he think of it? This is Stephen King's favorite adaptation of any of his work. He had a private screening with Rob Reiner. So Stephen King slapped himself in the head and said, how did I fuck this up? Gordie is the protagonist. Gordie, who in the novella is telling Chris's story. Chris is the center of it. And Stephen King said, no, I'm wrong. This makes no sense. Gordie is the one who should pick up the gun. This is his story. So it's amazing that this story, now we're talking 35, 40 years later, the three of us have had very different upbringings across the U.S., but it all ties back together to a common thing. We all share these insecurities about growing up. We share the ties to our friends. And it's such a universal tale that I think it works as well today as it does back in 1986.
Well, now's the time in the podcast where we give our Shat score for Stand By Me. The wipe score is our way of telling you how many wipes this movie would take to get out of perspective. But 0 wipes is Stephen King's best adaptation, in his own opinion. And 5 wipes is seeing a body that was hit by a train. I'll go first. This movie hits some heavy emotional notes, and it dares to depict boys the way they really are, not the way 80s movies pigeonhole them. One thing that struck me as very odd was this is a 90-minute movie.
Yeah.
Like, it's an hour and a half. It felt like double that. I don't know how they made time stand still, but Rob Reiner did it. And that was the only complaint I had. I got the point very early on, and then it just kept going. Like, this could have very easily been a short film and achieved the same thing. So for me, it is above average. I did not love it. I more than liked it. It's at 1.5 wipes.
Yeah, I think this is a good movie. It's not bad at all. It didn't have the gut punch I think it wanted to have because it took itself really seriously and it had very little fun. And because of that, it feels incredibly long. But I do think it's better than average. And it's an actual coming of age story without the monsters or aliens or treasure hunts that were more common in this era. And because of that rarity, I think it's good. I think it's 2 wipes.
So for me, if I had reviewed this 24 hours ago, I don't know what I would have given it. But the time to think and to remember, like that time I said with Billy Zelly. Billy Zelly's parents sucked. They were going through things. He was somewhat abused. I remember we used to go out and I would talk to him much in the way that Chris talks to Gordie. That we wouldn't survive our childhood without our good friends there who are sharing a common experience to kind of keep us grounded. So I think I'm going to give it 1 wipes. I originally thought this was like a 50s boomer coming of age. Oh, it's so great. But no, I'm now looking at it. It's showing us we're all damaged. Everybody. There's nobody that escapes adolescence and childhood and their families unscathed. Everybody has their baggage. We all deal with it differently. And I think this movie shows that. And we can all find a commonality in what it's like to be a kid afraid with parents that aren't perfect and a life that is unknown, what's going to happen in the future. So I think it's a 1 wipe. I did enjoy it, and I'm glad I had this pause to rethink my first take.
All right, well, with 1 wipe from Big D, 2 wipes from Ash, 1.5 wipes from me, that gives us an average wipe score for Stand By Me of 1.5 wipes.
Okay, so this is where we get the guilty feeling from Big D. That will now tie this in the 75 spot with The Thing, Scrooged, Spaceballs, Friday the 13th, Galaxy Quest, UHF, Scarface, and Magnolia. Who the fuck commissioned Magnolia? Who the fuck was that?
I'm an incredibly generous, brilliant Shat listener, eventual podcaster. Fuck that, dude. Although I have to say, okay, I'm not going to shit my pants about that, but I do have to bring up there is talk, sir, in the interwebs that you are, and I quote, beginning to dislike me. And it's obvious the tension that is growing between the two of us. And there are these 2 people who are really crossing their fingers.
I can barely tolerate you.
I know.
Barely.
They think that it means that like I'm going to finally be kicked off the show and it can just be a bunch of thick dicks again with their mics,
thick,
right?
Leech dicks, yes.
But I just want to bring up here and give you the opportunity in public to let me know. Are you done with me, Big D?
Fuck no. Please, are you kidding me? I love people who challenge me, people who make me grow, people who don't agree with me. If you want everybody to be yes men, fuck that. I love you. You've made me grow as a person.
It was very funny. They were crossing their fingers. They were like, oh, man, this is it. This is it. She's going to get kicked to the curb any day now because Big D doesn't like her. Gene doesn't have the power on this pod.
God damn it. Fuck yes.
Because Gene is Team Ash, right? But Big D, who knows?
Speaking of internet buzz, Big D, let's get to our voicemail. Our first one comes from Nick in Dallas, Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, what's going on, Shat Crew?
Ooh.
This is Nick Seibel from Dallas, Texas.
He means business.
I have a bone to pick with y'all. I love the podcast, by the way, but still, I have a bone to pick. First off, Rudy is one of the greatest football movies of all time. I didn't like the scores. I disagreed with y'all's scores. It's a great freaking movie. But here's one thing that really bothers me. on my favorite team, on God's favorite team, on America's favorite team, the Dallas Cowboys. And here's the problem I have with that, is that I'm a kid of the 90s, and I grew up in the 90s in Dallas, Texas, where we had football gods that played on that field every Sunday. And to hear this blasphemy coming out of my speakers, talking about how horrible the Cowboys are and how they need to disenfranchise, I'm here to tell you this. I had a great childhood. I got to watch great 80s films when I was a kid. I got to watch great 90s films as I was a kid. And then I got to watch the greatest dynasty, the Dallas Cowboys, America's team, as a kid. So I had a great childhood with great memories. And as for Cowboys of now, we're taking it all this year. You look at Dak Prescott. You look at that team. I know there's a New Orleans Saints fan there.
Who dat?
We play y'all later on this year. We're taking that game. We're going to the Super Bowl. Quote me. We are going to the Super Bowl. And if we don't go to the Super Bowl, I will donate $300 to the podcast.
Fuck yes, Rudy.
All right, guys. Have a great day.
Yes. And Nick, yes, you can go right now to PayPal or to Venmo and make that donation, because that shit ain't happening. He was passionate. I like that, though. He was very deliberate, and he had some things to get across. I'm not going to say I'm rooting against him, but a $300 a support donation would be great.
Yeah, you really think he'd position it the other way around? Like, if the Cowboys take it all, I'll donate $300.
Exactly. No,
It's a safer bet, Nick. It's a safer bet.
God, if they suck and they lose, I'm gonna suffer more by paying you money.
All right, next up we have a voicemail from Dakota in Tampa, Florida.
Hey, Shat Crew. Dakota from Tampa, Florida, or as we call it, Tampa Bay. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Love you guys' podcast. Keep up the great work. As a fan of the podcast, I do have to say that there are a bunch of times when I just laugh my ass off and actually become rather intrigued about wanting to watch a few of the movies, the most recent one being The Usual Suspects. Anyways, the first point of this message is I have to get it off my chest. I hate when people say Porsche rather than the proper way of saying it, Porsche. It does have an E at the end that is pronounced as an sound. I hear it all the time on all the podcasts and all the TV shows I listen to and watch. Big D, you just pushed me over the edge with saying it the wrong way. First strike, Big D.
Oh, come on.
As I said in this podcast, I laugh a lot. However, there are times when I get angry with the podcast when certain hosts go SJW, and Big D has to play the Zoom, Zoom, Zoom theme song. I think the first time was when Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure was reviewed. The second reason I called was actually to talk about cross-country drives in the movie Vacation. Yes, Chevy Chase was an asshole in that movie, but he did do a lot for his family to get them out to Wally World. And come on, it's Christy Brinkley. Regarding long-distance trips in my life, I always would do Disney trips down from Maryland with my family for a 2-week vacation. But most recently, I did one that went from here in Tampa all the way out to Anaheim, California, where I drove my fiance out there for her work as she's a traveling radiation therapist. Shout out to Kara. Love you, baby. When we made our drive out there were definitely times when it was super slow and boring, when I had to pull out some of my favorite episodes from your library to listen to, as well as that week's episode on Platoon. Then there were other times when we would just see sights that were so beautiful, like sunsets over West Texas, the rolling mountain ranges, and the Pacific Ocean in San Diego as we drove up to LA and Anaheim. Along the way, you do get used to certain tractor trailers and different cars when you pull off at gas stations. You usually get back on, and then you pass them 20 minutes later, and you're like, oh, look, there's that tractor trailer or car from 3 hours ago we passed. Anyways, I don't know what I would do without modern technology and podcasts like you to get me through long drives like that. Anyways, keep up the good work. Love you guys and be safe. Dakota from Tampa.
So Dakota, thank you very much, my Florida brother. If you want to meet up at Mons Venus, I will buy you the first round. And this one goes out to you.
Zoom, 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 boom, 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 boom. Here he comes to save the day.
Somebody call me? Dakota, I got so many things to say here. One, you are right about Porsche. I don't think it was Big D, actually. I think it was me who was mispronouncing it. Porsche. It is Porsche. You are right. I looked it up. So that is one. Two, let's talk about Chevy Chase being an ass, but doing a lot for his family to get them out to Wally World. His wife said, let's just fly.
Yeah,
he's the one that said no. They could have just flown out there. Everything would have been fine. 3, Kara, you're awesome. 4, I want to talk about when you decided to listen to the pod. You said, and I quote, there are times when it gets super slow and boring. Then I had to pull out some of my favorite episodes. Is that how you want to do me, Dakota? You just only want to bring me out when it's slow and boring? I should be included at the most exciting times in your life. I want to be there when you're making love. I want to be there when a baby's being born. Like, that's when it's Gene Lyons time.
That's only Ash that does that.
What, has a baby to Shat the movies?
Yes. You're our first Shat baby. That was officially,
well, that you know about.
But we've been there for the conception of millions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks, guys, for calling in with your voicemails. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can always reach us at 914-719-SHAT. We got some more that we'll be playing in the coming weeks. Big D, what movie do we have coming up next week?
Oh, next week we go back to the genre of sports films. In Durham, North Carolina, the Bulls minor league baseball team has one asset no other can claim, a poverty-loving groupie named Anna Savoy. As the team season begins, Annie selects brash new recruit, Ebby Calvin LaLouche, whom she christens Nuke to inspire with the religion of baseball. Nuke also receives guidance from veteran player Crash Davis to settle Nuke's erratic pitching and teach him to follow the catcher's leads. Commissioned by Kelly B. This was released in 1988, and this is a fucking great baseball movie if you love the sport, and it's right around the time of the World Series. So it's a perfect film.
Thanks, Kelly, for that commission. And thank you, Scott, in Friends of Texas, for commissioning Stand By Me. Thank you to all the commissioners who make this podcast possible. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. You can email us, host@shatthemovies.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, completing a free anonymous survey to help attract advertisers, buying our merch, or commissioning your own movie. Find all that information by visiting our website, shatthemovies.com. Also, you can check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all that information on our website, shatontv.com, wherever we find podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D and Ash, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie.
What do you believe in then?
Well, I believe in the small of a woman's back, the hanging curveball, high fiber, good scotch, and I believe in long, slow, deep, soft, wet kisses that last for 3 days.
Oh, my.
Who are you? I'm the player to be named later.
I love winning, man. You hear what I'm saying? It's like better than losing.
These are the ground rules. I hook up with one guy a season. Usually takes me a couple weeks to pick the guy. Kind of my own spring training.
It's cold in here.
You think Dwight Gooden leaves his socks on?
God, the sucker teed off in that like he knew I was going to throw a fastball.
He did know. I told him.
Honey, I want you to wear these when you're pitching on the road. They're garters.
Rose goes in the front, big guy.
Love is a lot like baseball. It's not whether you win or lose. It's how you play the game.
No problem, baby, no problem.
Kevin Costner.
Get a hit, Crash. Shut up.
Susan Sarandon.
Have you ever been tied up in bed?
Tim Robbins.
Woo-hoo! I'm too old for this.
Bull Durham.
We couldn't go one movie without Big D talking about a kid's dick.
I know.
But it was a thick one. It was a thick one, like Gordie said. A very thick one.
A thick dick or a thick leech?
No, the thickest dick in 4 counties.
Yes, Gordie said he's got a thick dick, a really meaty, thick cock. I believe it.
It's Wil Wheaton, for God's sake. Of course.
Hell yeah. Fucking Wesley Crusher slapping that thing down on the bridge. Yeah.